We're almost exactly where we were at the end of the previous video. Yours truly hit an extra key, so we got in a little bit of an extra screen, but we are now at the same place. In that IKE Phase 1 policy, we've set authentication, hash, the encryption, the group number. Now we got to set that lifetime. What's the first thing you ought to do, not just here really, but with any command that has any unit of data that it's going to use, or especially units of time? And that is use iOS help, because some commands are going to use seconds, some time-based commands will use minutes, some will use hours, some will use a combination thereof, and you don't want to enter one number thinking it's seconds when actually it's hours. Now here, if I asked you in a job interview situation or on a practice exam, enter the value that's going to give me a 24-hour lifetime. Well, if I enter 24 here, iOS help wouldn't let me do that anyway. And then you go, and then you run iOS help to see what's going on. The iOS would not allow you to put that value in because the range is 60 to 86,400. But what if I asked you, hey, put in a lifetime of 80 hours? And you put in lifetime 80 thinking that was hours instead of seconds just because you didn't look in iOS help. Just save yourself a lot of trouble and use iOS help to double check, especially your time-based values, but your database values as well. So let's go with the actual default and the maximum, which is 86,400, which is also 24 hours. So we've got our lifetime set up. We need to verify that we wrote our policy correctly. And we're going to use that command we saw earlier when we had only the default, show crypto ISACENT policy. And now all of a sudden we have two policies, which is a good thing because we just wrote that top one. Protection suite of priority 100. Sounds kind of formal. Well, we've got our encryption algorithm, our hash algorithm, authentication method, our Diffie-Hellman group, and our lifetime. You can just check them all right there just to verify that you entered indeed what you thought you entered. Now, I've gone ahead and pre-configured Router 3's policy. I usually don't do that, but you've seen the commands here in this video and the last one. We don't need to walk through that again, but I want to ask you a question actually about that as I remind you about what's going on with the policies, or fill you in on it first time actually. This policy is the heart of IKE Phase 1. Now, when Router 1 initiates the communication, which is what we're going to do eventually, these policies are going to be sent over to R3, the IKE Phase 1 policies, the ISACENT policies, the ones we just saw. And you can see Router 3 saying to itself, let me see if I have a match for one of those. So what happens then is that Router 3 looks among its own policies for one matching the policy coming in from R1. Now, the lowest numbered policy will be checked first. That's where the numbers come in. If that lowest numbered policy doesn't match, the next lowest numbered policy is checked, and so forth. Now, if a match is found, we proceed to Phase 2. If no match is found, there is no IKE Phase 2. Now, I'm going to show you on the board the config that I put on Router 3, and I gave you a couple of huge hints here. First, I italicized near, because it's a near match for policy 100 on Router 1, the one we just wrote. Is near going to be good enough? And I know you could spot it on your own, but I even bolded the one that's different. So authentication, encryption, hash, group, those are all exact matches for policy 100 over on Router 1. What about this lifetime though? I set that to actually half, 43,200 seconds. We get so used to values having to match exactly in networking because frankly in networking values often have to match for anything really to happen. Whether it's OSPF hello and dead timers, some BGP values, all kinds of things, they have to match. PPP, if you configure PPP, you can't have a near password match. That's not going to work out. With OSPF, as I mentioned, if the hello and dead times are different between two potential neighbors, they will stay potential neighbors. They will never form an adjacency. So I'm hammering you over the head with this for a reason, and here's why. With IKE Phase 1 policies, the hash, the encryption, the authentication, the Diffie-Hellman group, that number, they have to match. They have to be an exact match. But lifetime does not have to match. What it has to do, though, is this. The recipient policy lifetime may be equal to or less than the lifetime of the incoming policy. And should the recipient policy lifetime be less than that of the incoming policy, the lower value is used. Boy, that's a good practice exam question. Good job interview question. So you got to know not only that the lifetimes don't have to match, but on the recipient end, it has to be equal to or less than the lifetime of the incoming policy. Then you got to know that the value that will actually be used is the lower value. So there is a lot going on there with our policies. That is going to wrap up our IKE Phase 1 config. So coming up next, we're going to get that IPsec SA configured, set our values for that, and then we'll march on to our crypto ACLs. I'll see you on the next vid.